Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of 4 of the 2021 CDBG Environmental Review Training. Again, my name is Ed Bosch. I'm a project manager with IEDA and acting environmental review officer. All right, so we're going to start out with air quality as the first category that we're going to examine individually. So this goes back to the Clean Air Act of 1970, regulating air emissions from area, stationary, and mobile sources. And the Act authorized EPA to establish the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And those are obviously designed to protect public health and the environment. Areas that do not meet those standards are called non-attainment areas. And there are 2, but only 2 in the state of Iowa. The state must develop state implementation plans to regulate emissions in those non-attainment areas. So in order to find for sure if you are in a non-attainment area or not, there's the website to link to. If you're not in one of those areas, there's only 2 in Iowa, in the Quad Cities area and the Omaha metro area, then you're done. If you are in a non-attainment area, you have to document whether the proposed action has the potential for any damaging air emissions. If no potential reasonably exists, you just document that in your narrative and you move on. Again, no potential means no cause or increase, will not cause, or increase violations of the standards or delay compliance with any of the National Air Quality Standards. In the statutory checklist, that is 58.5, that you will see, unless you are exempt or categorically excluded, not subject to, you're going to see that checklist, and that is where you're going to put the description of your documentation. So make a statement, whether you're in or not, and if you are in a non-attainment area, will the project add it to the air contamination? If you're not in the area, in a non-attainment area, just state that and reference the map as appendix, whatever it would be in your review. So again, here's a national map showing Council Bluffs and Muscatine County as having some air quality issues. The rest of the state does not. Okay, so that I think is a fairly simple category to cover. Now we'll move on to contamination and toxic substances. So site contamination, release of hazardous or toxic chemical or other substances, including petroleum products, of course, or a site that's in proximity to your project in sufficient quantity that may be harmful to the environment, humans, or other living organisms. So what regulations apply to contamination? Well, all property proposed for HUD program assistance shall be free of hazardous materials or contaminations or chemicals, gases, radioactive substances, where the hazard could affect the health and safety of occupants or conflict with the intended utilization of the property. How do you investigate this? Well, it would take you a little time, but don't include on the statutory checklist list without some justification or explanation, and include relevant information. So sometimes it's obvious. Any of these photos, you can tell, hey, there's something going on here, and then you just have to determine how far away that is from your project site and if it affects your project site. So the photographs you saw, that would be your field inspection first step, or you can use Google Earth also to get an idea. And then there are 3 websites that list contaminated sites, including a specific website for leaking underground storage tanks. Consult those, put in your location, and you will see what sites there are and what level of contamination they may be contributing. If you want to go further, you can do a historic land use search using old city directories or land use directories or Sanborn maps. Those can be helpful to show you what existed historically on that particular property. And of course, there are certain kind of operations that raise red flags for contamination. So that's optional, but might help you if you want to investigate using that method. So in your field inspection, things to look for: vents and pipes and tanks, wells, distressed vegetation, never a good thing, drums, containers, pits, ponds, stained soils, pavements, smells, dump materials, and so on. Those are all pretty obvious. Usually it's not that easy to spot contamination, but sometimes it is. Again, this is a Sanborn map example, gives you an idea of what was there. And the listing there of the 8 items, those are all types of operations that could be potential suspects for contamination. So if you see any of those, you may want to try and find out more. Well, you will want to find out more about that site. So in your compliance search, these are screenshots from the links that were given in a previous slide. You can use ECHO, Environmental Mapper, and then the DNR Contaminated Sites and the underground storage tank and leaking underground storage tank. And see if any of these are on or near the project site, and see if any of those sites, if they are on or near, whether they will impact the project site. Again, safe search distances, federal generators, you should look for that. Leaking underground storage tanks, 1/2 mile radius, brownfield sites, 1/2 mile radius, and 1/2 mile radius on the circlist. Now those acronyms are defined on the websites. Sorry, I can't remember the full names for them at the moment, but again, 1/2 mile radius on all 4 of these, although the first doesn't say that, but all 4 of these is kind of a rule of thumb. If they're not within 1/2 mile, any of these type of sites as they're described at the websites on DNR, then don't be concerned about it. If they are, you need to do a little more investigation. So again, DNR leaking underground storage tanks. It will show you if you've got a high risk or not. If you do, it's within 1/2 mile. You need to find out if it's got a plume, as they say, that might affect your project site. So, yeah, a good screenshot there. If it's not high risk, if there's no risk, obviously just give us a copy of the screen, and you don't have to be concerned any further if there's no risk. So leaking underground storage tanks, if you have one, determine if it's adjacent or downhill from your project site. If it is, then click the remediation CA Tier 3 documents on the toolbar. And in this case, it reveals they're going to conduct testing and your next course of action would be to contact the DNR. And again, you get to this detail through the websites. And if you've got a problem site, include this kind of documentation and report on any of your conversations in your environmental review record. So DNR contaminated sites, how do you find these particular facilities? You click on the site, search, investigate all that come up, and it'll show you all of them, even if they're not particularly hazardous. But look at the ones that are close to your project site, and you click on the ID number on the left hand side to get to the detail. And here's an example of that. If it's closed, that's good. That takes you off the hook, so to speak, of any further investigation. Just give us a copy of that screenshot. And the EPA site, ECHO, is also a listing of contaminated sites, but of all kinds, not just leaking underground storage tanks. And see, this column here will show you if you have significant violations. If it says no, again, you're done. If it says yes, and it's anywhere near your project site, you need to investigate further. And again, please give us copies of these screenshots in your environmental review record. Okay, so, and again, on contaminated sites, that can get, before we move to asbestos here, it can get fairly complex. Give me a call. We'll work through it. If we have some that are you're not certain about their potential for contamination, we'll talk it through and get it figured out. So the next contaminant is good old asbestos. Found lots of places. It is considered a hazardous air pollutant, known to or suspected to cause cancer or other serious health problems. And there you see it's listed with a lot of other nasty type of chemicals, materials. So it's something to be taken seriously. So where is it? Well, you know, there you go. Pipe coverings, roofing are the two most common. Insulation would be another common area where it's found. The asbestos hazards. So the federal national emission standard for hazardous air pollution covers that, and that implementation of that law is delegated to the state air quality programs. Have been delegated EPA's responsibility for regulation of asbestos inspection, abatement, cleanup, and disposal. And we all know that asbestos has its own set of ways of being removed and handled and disposed of, and that as part of that act. Again, here's an example of a house and all of the potential places that asbestos can be found. So asbestos hazards apply to all building renovation or demolition activities. There is a minimal standard if the disturbed area is below a threshold of 80 lineal meters or 15 square meters. In residential buildings, if the project consists solely of a single 1 to 4 unit residential building, again, our popular single family residential rehab program, that is exempt. So you have radon, which we'll talk about here in a minute to worry about, but asbestos is exempt from single family housing rehab concerns. although if you want to remove it, you certainly can. So you need to, if you find asbestos, notify the proper agency of the state, do an inspection, do an abatement, and then proper disposal. All right, so radon. Iowa, I believe, has the highest radon soil content of any of the 50 states. You can kind of see how red Iowa is here on this map. So we're have that problem here. The radon, you all know, I think, what it is and what it can do. We're in a hot spot here in Iowa. It's colorless, odorless gas that permeates building materials, mostly found in basements and first floor. Considered to be the #2 cause of lung cancer, and testing is the only way to know for sure if it's present. And it can be mitigated by being vented, of course. In 2016, we started requiring that all owner-occupied housing must be tested for radon. And radon information is on our website. And the type of test that we recommend, there's a hotline number to order those kits. There's also brochures for homeowners that you can find on that website. And again, 12 hours prior to testing, windows and doors should remain closed so that you aren't reducing the rating through ventilation, because you want to know what it is when the windows and doors are closed. And avoid whole house fans, air conditioning set to recirculating mode, and 75-degree thermostat setting, or plus or minus 5 degrees. So those are all things you should do in preparation for testing. Put the test kit in the lowest livable area of the home, between 20 inches and 6 feet from the floor, 1 foot from walls, 3 foot from doors and windows, 4 inches away from any objects, 20 foot from airflow devices, away from furnaces, washers, and dryers. And hang them on a clear plastic hook, and test should be conducted for 3 to 7 days and then picked up. So test kit should have mailing instructions, but I believe I found that in our residential rehab programs that often they are just picked up by a person in the locality. Okay, but they can be mailed in as well. All right, and then there's a link to find the test results of your particular kit. If the results come back more than 4 picocuries per liter, the home has radon above the recommended exposure. You can retest and see if you get a lower reading, or you can have the homeowner sign off that they've received the radon test results regardless of the level of the radon in the home. If you have money in your budget for the rehab, you should mitigate, but you are not required. But you are required to let the homeowner know what the findings are so that they are aware. And here is a link to Iowa Department of Public Health to find a mitigation specialist in your area. All right, again, back to the good old statutory checklist. What do you need to show? For contamination, make a statement that project will or will not be affected, and why you come to that conclusion. Give us your documentation. lists the websites in the checklist, and then the printouts from the websites, the screenshots within your appendices. Okay, threatened and endangered species and their habitats. Endangered Species Act and Section 7 protocols governs this. Mandates that federally assisted activities not jeopardize the existence of plants and animals listed or proposed for listing on an endangered species list. And as the RE, you must ensure the activities avoid adversely modifying or destroying a habitat. Now, a lot of projects, just by their nature, are not going to affect any kind of endangered species habitat, and that's fine, but still needs to be documented. So the 4 classifications: endangered, threatened, proposed, or a candidate for one of those first 3. All right. So we have no proposed in the state, but we do have the other 3: endangered, threatened, and candidates. And that includes, as you see in the photo there, it also includes vegetation, not just animals. All right, so Fish and Wildlife Service must be consulted. If it may affect threatened or endangered species or critical habitat, informal consultation is required. If it may adversely affect, then a formal consultation is required. If there is no effect, if you determine there is no effect, and you check that box in the forms, then unless Fish and Wildlife disagrees with you, there is no need for consultation. So step by step, the RE, responsible entity, again, locality, determines whether proposed action could in any way, positive or negative, have an effect on a threatened and endangered species or its habitat. So this is the website you visit for a listing of threatened or endangered species, and then follow the instructions, Section 7 instructions. Okay. There's a HUD track for rehab projects, and then here is the DNR site for endangered species, and it'll list them pretty specifically. Okay. If threatened or endangered species could be present or critical habitat is present, you must consult with qualified sources to determine the impact of the action. Okay. Informal consultation with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, or a biological assessment using a qualified consultant, and that would be a little higher level of review. Obviously, I have not yet seen a actual biological assessment being done, but may be necessary if there is a true impact. So the RE determines the impact of the action, may affect, but not likely to adversely affect, or may affect, likely to adversely affect. Again, may affect, and that is the vast majority of what we see when this comes up at all. Informal consultation required, and there are forms to send to Fish and Wildlife, and they will concur, hopefully, with your finding. If it is likely to adversely affect, then you're getting into a biological opinion and a longer process, more complicated process, obviously. But hopefully you will not have that situation. If you do, though, you're required to take those additional steps. After your consultation is complete, you complete your decision making, and there are a range of possible actions. You can adopt reasonable and prudent alternative or mitigation measures, and I have seen that, and sometimes it's just common sense stuff and doesn't really negatively affect your project much or increase costs. Of course, you can always not do the project at all. That's most of the time not a reasonable option, though. Or you can modify your proposed action or develop new alternatives and continue consultation with Fish and Wildlife to find a solution. And whatever you decide, you need to let Fish and Wildlife know. Okay. Again, that is when there is an effect. All right, and back to the statutory checklist. Make a statement, no effect, may affect, but not likely to be adversely affect, or the worst case scenario, likely to adversely affect endangered species. So, or threaten. Again, supporting documentation should be placed in the appendix. Species list, which you will get, that you'll receive. Biological assessment if it gets to that point, and Fish and Wildlife Service opinions if you get to that level. Okay, so that is the end of segment 2. Again, thanks for your attention. There's my contact information, and I will see you in segment 3.